Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining the virtual book party, our favorite books of 2022, which, if you ask any librarian, is actually the hardest question to answer because there are so many good ones, which is why we all have multiple. And it was a really hard thing to limit ourselves to 3. And some people did not follow the rules and did not limit themselves to 3. So we will be sharing those, and we're going to be introducing ourselves as we go.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Allison Corcoran. I'm an adult advisory librarian with the district. And if the 33 books we talk about tonight are not enough to fill up your to be read list, we want to invite you to an in-person event at Coble Library on January 21st at 10 a.m. where Pamela and Julie and I will discuss some of the books we're really excited for the first part of 2023. So looking forward to that. And then I will go in. First up, my first book is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelley Van Pant. Some of you are tired of hearing me talk about this book because I have been talking about it since I read it in pre-publication in January. But I'm going to keep at it until more of you have read this book. I did convince a couple more panelists to read it since then. Marcellus is an elderly octopus living in an aquarium, and Tova is an older woman who's staving off loneliness and boredom by spending her nights cleaning in the aquarium. A beautiful friendship develops between Marcellus and Tova, and I promise you, you will fall in love with Marcellus, especially if you do the audiobook. And I can see Pamela and Julie are like, yes, yes. So everyone, you have to read Remarkably Bright Creatures.
So As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow is a YA title, although I would recommend it for older YA as it does have a lot of explicitly described violence in it. So this one is about Salama, who was a pharmacy student in Syria when the Arab Spring happened, and now she's volunteering at a hospital in the absence of doctors, even though she's not a doctor and she wasn't training to be one. The hospital is pretty much where she spends most of her time, or she's with her sister-in-law who is pregnant, who is also trying to convince her to leave the country, but she feels like she has to stay and help out in whatever way she can. And her father and her brother-in-law were arrested, and she kind of actually hopes that they are dead because the alternative is worse. And she is she's just really struggling with whether she should stay or when she should leave. Then she meets Keenan, who is taking care of his younger siblings. He also doesn't have his parents. And that makes the decision even harder for her. So yeah, again, lots of really explicit detail that really tugs at the heartstrings.
Okay. The Weight of Blood is one of the YA books that we actually had to battle it out to see who got the chance to book talk it. My name is Catherine. I almost forgot. I'm one of the teen librarians. Anyway, so The Weight of Blood by Tiffany Jackson is really amazing. It's probably one of my favorite books of the year. Well, it definitely is. Obviously, I put it on this list. I forget what I'm talking about. Anyway, has a super dynamic audiobook. I definitely recommend it. It is recorded as a series of podcasts and interviews and flashbacks. This is, as the cover might suggest, a remake of Stephen King's Carrie that also takes on institutional racism, and Jackson infuses it with her signature style that makes you feel strong emotion as you're reading the book. It is very gory, so I would recommend it probably for older high school students and up. If you like that take on the classic, I want to read a new take on a classic horror novel, highly recommend this one. It was one of those books that I multiple times sat in cars, in my car, in the parking lot, and other places when I got home, just so that I could keep listening to it.
So my name is Erica. I am also a teen librarian. All 3 of us went in a row tonight. And this, Hollow Fires by Samira Ahmed, was one of my favorite books that I spent extra time in my car listening to this year. It is a young adult murder mystery with a supernatural element. It's inspired by a true crime. Our primary voice in this book is Sophia, who is an Indian American Muslim, and she uses her role on her school newspaper to try and combat prejudice, particularly after she hears of a local Muslim boy who has gone missing. She feels connected to the story, especially when she realizes that she knew him in passing. This is our other perspective in the book. We get some chapters from Jawed. He was the son of Iraqi refugees who became semi-famous when his teacher mistook his Halloween costume for a bomb and called the police to have him arrested. Unfortunately, the news that it was not a bomb did not get as much airplay or ink as the news of his arrest. And once we start reading his chapters, we figure out pretty quickly that something bad has happened to him, and he has been killed. His ghost is able to contact Sophia and lead her to his body, where she becomes even more determined to figure out what happened to him. This was definitely thriller suspense. I would recommend this one for readers age 13 and up, 7th grade and up. There's some heavy topics. You will definitely feel some anger at the blatant racism. But if you liked or know a fan of Dear Martin, this book would definitely be for you.
Hi there, my name is Jessica and I'm one of the youth services librarians. So I work primarily with elementary school age kids. And today I'm talking about a Rover story, which is middle grade fiction, so like grades 3 and up. But it's one of those books that makes a great whole family read or listening to an audiobook if you're taking a road trip. A Rover story tells the tale of resilience, whose nickname is Rez. And Rez is a fictional Mars rover whose journey is inspired by the real Mars rover Curiosity. The story starts with Rez waking up in a lab surrounded by a bunch of hazmat suits, NASA scientists. Rez is constantly observing everything around him and learning how to be a rover. But he also starts to learn something else. He starts developing human emotions while he's being assembled and tested. There is another Mars rover in the lab as well, and her name is Journey. And Journey always tells Rez that he is a strange robot, and that human feelings are dangerous and have no place on a Mars mission. Rez thinks that there must be something wrong with him, there must be something faulty in his programming, and he figures he's just the backup rover. Journey must be the real rover because she acts so much more like a robot is supposed to. So imagine Rez's surprise when launch day comes around, and it turns out that Rez is the one going to Mars and Journey is staying behind. A Rover story gave me like the major wild robot or Wall-E vibes if your family enjoyed that Disney movie. I've read more than 400 books so far this year, and this one was my favorite kids book by far.
Good evening, I'm Julie, and I am a collection librarian with Arapahoe Libraries, and I purchase adult fiction for the district. I wanted to start off with two titles that are debuts from true crime podcasters turned adult fiction authors. The first is Butcher and the Wren, from the author Elena Urquhart. She's the co-host of Morbid, a true crime podcast. She's also an autopsy technician by day in real life. This story is told from two viewpoints. Wren is Dr. Wren, the medical examiner in the Louisiana Bayou, who is piecing together clues in an effort to find a serial killer. And Jeremy is the butcher or that serial killer. This is an addictive read with straight from the morgue details only an autopsy technician could provide. This gives you vibes of Silence of the Lambs, and it's for fans of Patricia Cornwell or Dexter. The second is All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. She's co-host of the #1 true crime podcast, Crime Junkie. A young journalist returns to her very small hometown to care for her ailing uncle. While there, she becomes obsessed with finding the killer of her childhood neighbor. It's now 20 years later, and a similar disappearance is gripping this same small town. Could tying these two crimes together be just the breaking story that this journalist needs? These chapters rotate between 1994 and 2019, and it's hard to put down.
Hi, I'm Pamela. I'm one of the adult services librarians. Anyway, so Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black. I have been talking about this book since before it was published last year. So if you've already heard me talk about it, you can take a little break. Jacob is a Black father who attempts to make amends with his gay son through letters written while Jacob has a terminal illness. So he's on his deathbed. He's estranged from his son Isaac. And in these letters, he tries to explain why he raised his son the way he did, to be a strong Black man in the American South. But that's not who Isaac is, and it was not what he needed from his father. This is really a coming-of-age story of an elderly gentleman reaching an understanding of himself and the trauma that affected his life choices. This book is insightful, empathetic, ultimately very hopeful, and really well written. Don't Cry for Me by Daniel Black.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and I'm also a youth services librarian, just like Jessica. So I do ages 5 to 12. And my first book is called Answers in the Pages by David Levithan. I would say this one is for 4th grade and up. And if you are in the mood for a heartwarming story or something that will make you cry, even adults will love this book. This is told in 3 different perspectives. We get Donovan's perspective. Donovan has left his copy of The Adventurers on his kitchen counter, a book he's reading for school. And that's when his mom picks it up, starts to read the very last page, and ends up finding a problem with it. She wants to ban the book from his school because the entire town is trying to decide if the main characters in this book are gay. We get, for our second perspective, we get the snippets from the book, The Adventures, that the class is reading. And then the third perspective, we don't really know who it is, but it's a story of another boy who is kind of finding his place and finding himself in life. These 3 stories come together in the most surprising way. And like I said, the ending made me cry. And Jessica put in the chat, it is such a timely book and so good. That is Answers in the Pages.
Hi, I'm Ted. I'm also a youth librarian. Unlike the other 2 youth librarians, though, I will not be talking about any youth books tonight. This is Dead Collections, and if you are looking for an atypical vampire romance, this is definitely going to be one to pick up. It's about a guy named Saul. Saul finally feels like he has his life on track. He has just started transition. He's moved into his dream job as an archivist in a pop culture museum in San Francisco. Everything is going his way, right up until the point when he gets tetanus. In this world, if you have a fatal illness, there is one way that they can try to keep you alive for at least a few more years. They will infect you with a vampire virus. Saul becomes infected, and as a result, everything that he had taken for granted kind of comes crashing down. Instead of living the life he had always wanted, he spends literally all of his time in the archives because he doesn't need to sleep. Enter Elsie. Elsie's wife has just passed away. She was a showrunner for an extremely famous 90s kind of sci-fi. It feels a lot like a knockoff Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She has come to donate her late wife's materials, and naturally they start bonding over the shared fact that they were, unbeknownst to each other, deeply involved in the same fandoms in the 90s, and also writing each other really painfully adolescent fan fiction towards each other. This is one of the most unusual romances I've read in a while, but it is so good. If you are looking for something a little more atypical, this would definitely be a great one to pick up.
Hi, I'm Tegan. I'm a reference librarian based out of Coble, and my first pick for my favorite this year was Woman Eating by Claire Coda. Following Ted along with an atypical vampire story, Woman Eating is more of a character study full of millennial ennui. I absolutely loved the exploration of how our relationships or non-existent relationships with our parents affects us. Lydia, or Lyd as she prefers, has had to put her vampire mother in a senior living home, so she is on her own for the first time in her life. She's having to navigate how to find food on her own, while also coming to terms with what she wants to eat and if she wants to change her diet. Her mother only ever allowed pig's blood because it was all they deserved, blood from an animal her mother deemed dirty. Lyd is navigating a lot of the trauma and negative feelings about who and what she is that was passed down from her mother. There's a lot of introspection and research into why her mother might have felt that way, a wonderful understanding of where her mother is coming from, but that she does not have to subscribe to the same beliefs. Lyd also dreams a lot about what she might eat if she were human. Would she eat Japanese food to feel more connected to her father, who she never knew as he had died before she was born? Would she shun her heritage from her mother and father and strictly eat British food? So the commentary on food and how it ties us to community is also amazing. I could say so much more about this title, but I'll leave it at give it a try. This is a title that will linger long after you finish the last page.
Okay, so Meredith Alone by Claire Alexander is like kind of a late addition to my list for this year. Meredith suffers from depression, anxiety, and agoraphobia, and she hasn't left her apartment in a few years. She functions because she can do her job online. She has a great delivery service. She has her cat, and she has one close friend who comes to visit her and runs some errands for her. But it's not really a full life. It's kind of a half life she's leading. And we're led into some knowledge and information about her past that explains the traumas that led her to this situation. But soon some changes are going to come that might force Meredith to expand her life. I loved this character of Meredith so much, and she's stayed with me, and that is what has earned this book a place on this list. I cried for her a little, but I also, the day that she gets up the courage to go and sit out on her front porch and enjoy the sunshine, I mean, I was kind of cheering and crying at the same time. And I think you would want to cry and cheer along with Meredith also.
Okay, Poster Girl is an adult dystopian novel, though it is by the author of the Divergent series. Sonia's father was a government official of the delegation that ruled the Seattle, Portland, Vancouver area as a police state, and they control people through eye implants called the insights. And as a teen, Sonia really believes, really buys in to the delegation's message and believes in obeying every rule. And she was overjoyed when she was asked to be a poster girl for the delegation's slogan, saying what's right is right. And then there's a rebellion and the delegation is toppled and Sonia's whole family takes a suicide pill, and Sonia changes her mind last second and is captured by the rebellion. As a public figure, she is not allowed to join society, but is sent to this apartment complex that is like a prison called the Aperture with other higher level delegation members. And she has been there at the beginning of the book for 10 years, and she is given a chance to leave if she helps the rebellion or the new government find a girl who went missing when she was a baby. And now she is rediscovering the world that has moved on, even though everyone can pretty much recognize her because she was the poster girl. This was really, I've been reading a lot of young adult fiction, so this one was one of the few books I read that was adult, and it really reminded me of like good old-fashioned dystopian novels.
All right. So, Does My Body Offend You by Myra Cuevas and Marie Marquardt is one of those books that I feel like flew under the radar a little bit more than it should have this year. It was one of those books that kept me thinking about it long after I had finished. So it's told in dual perspective. We meet Milena, who is a Puerto Rican Hurricane Maria refugee living with her aunt in Florida, and Ruby McAllister, who is a well-meaning, as she's self-described, feminist rebel who has recently moved to Florida from Washington. The story gets going when, after receiving a terrible getting a terrible sunburn, Milena decides to go to school without a bra on, and in an attempt to make her, I don't know, follow dress code, the principal of the school suggests that she tapes panty liners to her breasts to imitate a bra. Everyone is outraged. Milena is outraged. And when Ruby hears about it, she decides that this is going to be the crusade that she is going to get behind. And like I said, well-meaning, but tweets about it to some other social activists, and it goes viral against Milena's wishes. So this story was really the story about the power of friendship and feminism, learning when it's your place to step up and when we need to step back and honor the wishes of others, and a timely story about body autonomy. I will give some content warnings for sexual assault on the page, racism and sexism. I would recommend this for high school, older high school students and adults.
The Silence That Binds Us by Joanna Ho is young adult contemporary realistic fiction. This was also one of my favorites of the year. May is a Chinese-American teenager and aspiring writer. She is very close with her older brother, Danny, who seems to have everything going for him. He's funny, he's smart, he just got into Princeton. Everyone seems to love Danny. And May is devastated when Danny commits suicide. Her grief is only expounded when a prominent local businessman publicly blames the pressure Asian families supposedly put on their children to succeed in school for Danny's suicide. May channels her anger and grief into a poem that ends up published in the newspaper. But when it's published, it's met with mixed reactions from her entire community, as well as the population in the town at large and her family. This leads May and her friends to begin a Take Back the Narrative campaign, even though doing so could have serious repercussions for her and her family. During the process of putting this campaign together, May has to take a look at herself and her own views of race and racism as well, which was really poignant and fascinating to read. The book was beautiful. The writing just flows in a really lovely way, and the story itself is, as we've been saying in the chat, definitely emotional, definitely a touching your heartstrings book in the best way. I would recommend this book for high school students and adults. I think it has a great appeal for those older ages.
Scout's Honor by Lily Anderson is a darkly humorous young adult horror novel. But I really think that Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans of any age will get a lot of enjoyment out of this novel. So 16-year-old Prudence Perry is a third-generation scout in the Ladybirds, and you can tell from the cover that the Ladybirds are not like your typical cookie-slinging Girl Scouts. So this group masquerades as a girls' social organization, but in reality, the Ladybird Scouts are tasked with protecting the unknowing population from interdimensional parasites, also known as mulligrubs. So if you have ever felt sad and you didn't know why, you can blame this invisible mulligrub worm for feeding off of your energy, and now you know. 3 years ago, Prue's best friend died during a hunt, and much to her mother's disappointment, Prue has had nothing to do with the Scouts ever since that happened. But all of that is about to change this summer. Prue's story really resonated with me because I was a total failure as a Girl Scout, and I could really relate to her story. And like I said, if you like Buffy the Vampire Slayers, if you like girl power stories, you should check out Scout's Honor.
Lessons in Chemistry. The accolades for this title just continue to roll in, this New York Times bestseller. It's the 1960s in California, and this is where we meet Elizabeth Zott, a brilliant scientist working behind the scenes to support the men at a research institute where she works, because that's really all that women were permitted to do at the time. The unthinkable for our character Elizabeth happens, and she falls in love with one of her coworkers. Together, the couple take in a stray dog, and all seems idyllic. for the time being. Circumstances force a change in career for Elizabeth, and she begins hosting what eventually becomes America's most beloved cooking show, Supper at 6. Elizabeth is quirky, she's likable, she bucks the status quo, and she challenges people for inclusion and the proper recognition that she deserves. Such lovable characters and a storyline. This is for fans of Where'd You Go, Bernadette, or Her Hidden Genius.
Stoned is my nonfiction favorite this year. We discussed this at the Nonfiction Book Club, and we had one of our best discussions of the year about this book. It's a fascinating and different way of looking at history. So the author, Aja Rodin, suggests that what moves the world is what moves each of us, namely desire. Desire for the rare, desirable for the beautiful. What makes a stone a jewel, she talks about. What makes a particular jewel priceless? And why do we covet these beautiful things? And so in this account of how 8 jewels shaped the course of history, the author, a jeweler and a scientist, tells an original and often startling story about our addiction to beauty and the darker side of human desire. She talks about countries and basing the wealth and their finances on precious, emeralds or pearls or other precious jewelry and metals. This is a very accessible and entertaining account of our desire for what we think of as rare and extraordinary, and how this desire has impacted history. It's very, very approachable. It's not a dull history book at all. I know we have a couple of nonfiction book club members online, and I think they might agree with me. Give this one a try. It's really fun.
This is the Area 51 files. This is one of my newer favorite books of the year. I would say that this could be good for a read aloud for kids as young as 2nd, 3rd grade, but reading on your own, 4th grade and up. This is about a girl named Sky, and Sky has lived with her grandma for most of her life. Unfortunately, her grandma has to move to a nursing home, and Sky is being sent to live with an uncle that she's never met before. Her uncle is said to live in Area 51, the place that is rumored to hold all the secrets of the government, including aliens. When Sky gets there, it turns out that all of the rumors are true. This Area 51 is full of aliens, and they live there just like your neighbors live next to you. As soon as Sky gets there, though, a group of aliens goes missing, and everyone is blaming Sky because nothing has ever gone missing from Area 51 before. Sky teams up with her neighbor Elvis, who happens to be an alien himself, her pet hedgehog, and a dog named Pickles, to figure out what has happened to these aliens so that she can take the blame off of her and continue to live in Area 51. This is full of fun illustrations as well, so you'll have to pick up the book to see it. Good for kids who really like illustrated novels like Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
So this is White on White. This is actually not nonfiction, but it will inadvertently make you extraordinarily interested in medieval nude sculpture, of all things. It's about an unnamed graduate student who takes on a apartment leased by a professor in a nameless European city to study medieval nude sculptures. She's extremely lonely in her new city. She doesn't really have a whole lot of connections, which is why initially she's extraordinarily excited to meet Agnes, the wife of the professor. She's extremely talented. She's established in her career. She seems to know everyone. She kind of takes the student under her wing, and that's kind of when things take a turn. This seems like a very, very insightful personal novel, but there's something strange about Agnes. As they get closer, the student notices that Agnes has a habit of going a little further than she probably should, discussing her relationships, past and present, both with her husband, her children, her resentments, her thoughts about art. And she notices that Agnes continues to, instead of paint anything new, there's a single canvas in her studio with a white portrait that never seems to actually have any more paint on it every time that the student visits. This isn't necessarily a thriller, it's realistic, but it has the undertone of something almost deeply unsettling and moving at the same time. Very strange, but also very wonderful. If you like books about art, or if you like realistic fiction, this would definitely be a great one to pick up.
All right. The Grace Year by Kim Liggett is a young adult title for ages 14 and up. We enter a place called Garner County, where girls wear white ribbons in their hair and are branded with their father's marks. Around their 16th year, the girls are given red ribbons and go through a veiling ceremony to be marked for engagement to marriage or labor work. The Grace Year is when girls are sent off together to some mysterious place and expected to release all their magic and come back to society as docile women. Not everyone returns, and the ones who do are scarred, physically and emotionally. Upon their return, the girls swap their red ribbons for black and are either married or sent off to work. If an engaged girl does not return, her fiancé will choose a new wife from the remaining girls. No one talks about the Grace Year, so it is unclear what really happens out there. Readers follow Tierney through her Grace Year, and the revelations about that time are quite shocking. I reached the end of the novel feeling pretty melancholy, despite the hopeful ending. This novel is dark and gory and a tale of survival against all odds. What is so odd about The Grace Year is it's about women going wild, being jealous, viciously hurting each other, and yet somehow manages to be a celebration of women and the ties between them. It's incredible how Liggett takes these women to their very worst, so we can appreciate them at their best. This one is for fans of The Handmaid's Tale, The Hunger Games, and Lord of the Flies.
Okay, so Pamela and I argued about whose favorite these books were, among others. We didn't know that that also meant that that left out Julie from also arguing these were two of her favorites. So we decided to share, though. So How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water by Angie Cruz is that best possible combination of a serious story with loads of humor as Cara Romero searches for employment late in life. As Julie says here, do the audiobook, but maybe not in public because you will, well, okay, I was actually snorting with laughter with some of the things Cara says. Loved it. Pamela?
Okay, we all want impossible things. So this book is for you if you like funny books about friendship, but don't mind keeping a Kleenex with you. Edie and Ash have been best friends for over 40 years, but at 45 years old, it is way too soon for Edie to be given the terminal diagnosis that she receives. So Ash determines to make Edie's last weeks very comfortable, creating memories and being completely there for her in spite of what's happening in Ash's own life. Ash, as she shapes her life around the last days of Edie, she finds herself stumbling through her grief and her upcoming and inevitable loss. Phew, my wish is for all of us to have a friend like Ash and to be a friend like Ash. So that's, we all want impossible things.
So This Vicious Grace is a fantasy novel. It's young adult, I would say 8th grade and up. And the main character, Alessa, she is called a Fenestra. She was chosen by the god Dea and imbued with magic, but her magic is to amplify another person's magic. So she must find her counterpart, her Fonte, a person with magical abilities, so they can fight together. And usually they join their magic by getting married. And the last 3 people that she chose as her Fonte died as soon as they joined their magic together. And she is kind of in a rush to find her Fonte because the day of the Divorando is near, and this is when Dea's opposition, Crollo, sends demons into their world, and the Fenestra and the Fonte working together is the only chance to save their city. And she's desperate to find her Fonte, and because also people are starting to lose their faith in her, and they think that maybe she is not the true Fenestra. And there is a priest who is actually inciting people to maybe kill her and find someone else. So she decides that she can't trust anyone because even her closest advisors are possibly conspiring against her. So she hires a bodyguard, Dante, who is an outcast. He is a mercenary, and she doesn't know anything about his past, but the fact that he might be less biased and he doesn't really care about any of their, about her not being the Fenestra. But then she realizes that the things that she doesn't know about his past might end up backfiring. So this one was a great fantasy. I really enjoyed it, and it has a romance element too.
Nikhil Out Loud is a middle grade novel that I would recommend for 5th grade and up, and it is a much lighter and more joyful book than my other 2 recommendations. Very wonderful, a book that left me just happy after I finished reading it. It is the story of Nikhil, who is a middle schooler and cartoon voice actor, and is out and gay. And he moves, his life is turned upside down when he moves from LA to small town Ohio. Very different scene than he has ever experienced. They're there to take care of his ailing grandfather. And he just kind of wants to continue to record the part for his TV show and make some friends. And his life is yet again disturbed when he decides to try out for the school play, and the starstruck teacher casts him in the lead role, even though it's a musical and he can't sing. And his new best friend is actually a much better fit for the part. Things get even more tense for him when some people in the town decide to protest having a gay student in the lead role of the play. This book is like complete with epic musical scenes in giant parking lots. It is a wonderful story, and it will leave you with a great hope for the future, leaving it in the hands of our kids.
The Life and Crimes of Hoodie Rosen by Isaac Bloom is also contemporary realistic fiction. Like my other 2 favorites tonight, this one also deals with some weighty topics, but unlike my other 2 tonight, this one is also very, very funny. In this one, we meet teenager Hoodie, which is short for Yehuda. Hoodie is an Orthodox Jew. Due to recent rent increases, his entire Orthodox community, with whom he's lived his entire life, has had to uproot and move to a whole new town. And as their Orthodox community tries to establish this new space for themselves, they run into friction with the already established population there, most of whom are not Jewish and don't quite understand Orthodox ways. The town mayor is particularly outspoken against the plans that the Orthodox community has for a new high-rise building. Hoodie's parents and teachers warn Hoodie against interacting with non-Jews, but he ends up meeting a local girl, Anna Marie, who turns out to be the daughter of the mayor, and probably the last person Hoodie should develop a crush on, but develop a crush he does, particularly after Anna Marie tries to help him remove some swastikas that have been painted on local Jewish gravestones. However, this act leads to trouble with Hoodie's parents and the rest of the community, who believe Hoodie has acted against the Torah by interacting with Anna Marie. Tensions only increase between Hoodie and his Orthodox community, and between the Orthodox community as a whole and the rest of the town, leading to violence and tragedy. As I said, Hoodie is smart and funny, and there's a wonderful balance of humor and depth throughout this book. I would say that this book is great for teens aged 13 and up. I think some 12-year-olds would even be interested in this book, and I also think that adults would find Hoodie endearing, as was said in the chat.
So I have a huge soft spot for culinary romance. Chef's Kiss by Jarrett Melendez is a queer culinary romance that is also an adult graphic novel. It really reminds me of being in my 20s after college and wondering what to do with my English major, and how to get an entry-level job that somehow still requires years of experience. Those were fun times. Not really. But anyways, Ben Cook on the front cover is also an English graduate. He's having a hard time finding a job in anything remotely related to the publishing industry. So he gets more and more desperate. He starts applying for like the most random jobs, but he even bombs an interview to be a garbage collector. One day, fate brings Ben to this random restaurant with a sign that says, "Now hiring, no experience necessary." The magic words. Ben thinks that it will be the perfect way to pull a steady paycheck while still pursuing his writing career on the side. But then Ben starts to fall for Liam, who is a super dreamy chef at the restaurant. And suddenly, Ben isn't so sure what he wants from life anymore, or what path he should choose. Ben's story is both super cute and super relatable. And if you want to know how the pig on the front cover figures into the story, you will have to read this graphic novel to find out.
All right. I wanted to feature two of my favorite nonfiction titles with a similar theme of that of addiction, and specifically the opioid addiction that is gripping our nation right now. First up, Matthew Perry, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. Wow. Just wow. This book is not just the Friends fans out there or the Chandler Bing fans. This book is for everyone to help people understand the disease known as addiction. While I certainly enjoyed all the vignettes and the quips about his life on set, Perry's relationships with some of very famous women of the time, and he definitely benefited from the opportunities afforded to him after he catapulted to fame as Chandler Bing. This book was so much more. What will stay with me from this book? The people that stood by Matthew during his darkest times. With tears in my eyes as the book ended, I was really thankful that Matthew Perry penned this book, and I believe his story is timely and can only help others. Forget the #1 movie and the #1 TV show that Perry had at the exact same time. This, I believe, this is the legacy that he was meant to leave, and truly his best work ever. And then from Beth Macy, you may remember Beth Macy from Dope Sick, which was made into a Hulu miniseries starring Michael Keaton, comes Raising Lazarus. This is another phenomenal, incredibly well-researched book from Macy on the realities of the opioid crisis facing our country. She delves in and presents the crisis from all angles, from the addicted trying to survive to the families that are grieving lost loved ones, from the companies at the centers of distribution to the need for medically assisted treatment. Macy really dissects this emergency that we are facing. And yet questions still loom large as the problem continues to grow, and headlines report losses to opioids and fentanyl-laced drugs nearly daily. Really, I find this one a must read for us to learn more about this health crisis we're facing and how to approach treatment while dealing with the realities and the dangers of fentanyl.
Signal Fires by Danny Shapiro. This was published just recently, about 6 weeks ago. You may know Shapiro, the author, from her memoirs. Excuse me. Her latest was Inheritance, about her coming to terms with surprising news about who she is, her background. But she's a fiction writer also. This is her first novel in 15 years, and it examines ties that bind families together, something of which she knows about personally. It's also about the secrets that can break them apart. It starts in a New York suburb in 1985 when the teenagers are out for a joyride, and they hit a tree, and one of the teenagers is killed in that car crash. One of the Wilf children was driving the car. We follow the story of this family, the Wilf family, as the years pass, and the father, Dr. Wilf, becomes involved with the Shankmans, the new family across the street. He helps actually to deliver their only son, Waldo. Waldo is, as he grows up, is a lonely boy and almost something of a genius. He's a very unusual boy. And he's more comfortable with the elderly, older Dr. Wilf across the street than he is with his own father. So this is for you if you like quiet stories of family, secrets, interconnections over the years. It's the kind of book I just love. So Signal Fires by Danny Shapiro.
All right, this is The Stars Did Wander, Darkling. Sorry to my coworkers who have had to hear me book talk this already this month. This is the creepiest book I've read this year as far as kids' books go, and I would recommend this one for 5th grade and up. So if you're fans of creepy, mystery, horror, but also if you're a fan of Stranger Things, you might like this one. It's about a boy named Archie, and Archie lives in a quiet seaside town where nothing exciting ever happens until now. Archie's dad is the head of a construction crew, and they have been tasked with turning the old Langdon mansion into a hotel for tourists. As they are digging underneath into the cliffs that are beneath the hotel, they open up a series of caves and holes. Archie's dad describes it as Swiss cheese, says he doesn't get a good feeling from these caves and decides to stop digging. The whole town agrees with him, and that's when weird things start to happen. Archie meets this older lady in town that he's never seen before, and she is talking about evil being let out and it should have been kept in, and then something bad happens to her. He sees a neighbor in the woods doing something very strange, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. And he and his friends start hearing axe chopping noises in the middle of the night. That's when all of the adults seem to kind of change as well. All of a sudden, they want to start digging into the caves again. In fact, they feel like they need to. And Archie thinks that these adults must have been changed out with somebody else. Archie and his friends decide to start digging deeper into this mystery, but there are dark and evil forces that don't want Archie and his friends to find out the truth, and they will do anything that they can to stop him. So that is The Stars Did Wander, Darkling.
So this is Pixels of You. This graphic novel is kind of like a very gentle gay Blade Runner. So if that sounds of interest to you, you should definitely check out this one. It's about two graduate students studying photography in the near future. One is Indira. She is Indian American and having trouble fitting in due to a crippling car accident that happened and her inability to find adequate treatment. The other is Fawn. Fawn is an android who is one of the first models to have a almost completely human appearance. She has the privilege of blending in with everyone around her, even though she feels permanently like an outsider. The two of them do the unthinkable when they are at a gallery showing one night and inadvertently admit to each other that they absolutely hate each other's work. They can't stand it. As they're both in the same program, they're both in the same program, the owner of the gallery essentially forces them to work together on their next project. It's a bit of a shorter story, but if you love graphic novels or futurism, this would definitely be a great one to pick up.
All right. None of This Rocks is a memoir by Joe Troman. He's a co-founder of the band Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy will always be my #1 band. I could listen to Patrick sing the phone book and I would die happy. So when I discovered that Joe wrote a memoir, sign me up. I absolutely loved learning more about Joe and his beginnings. I loved how he used words and created imagery, which was very on brand for a member of Fall Out Boy. I was shocked at the revelation of Joe's substance issues and how it had all come about. However, I appreciated how open and honest he was throughout the whole book about his mental health struggles. Stories like these are so important. They not only let others know they are not alone, but really highlight that all that glitters is not gold. It was fascinating to learn a bit about the Chicago music scene in the late 90s to the early 2000s, as Joe had experienced it, and how a band like Fall Out Boy came out of that movement. Joe's knowledge of music was really fascinating and made me want to learn more. I really felt for Joe having had 3 back surgeries, but I'm glad he's on the mend and recognizes that people care for him and want him to remain a member of the band he helped create. I appreciated the hopeful ending, and I'm looking forward to seeing the fruition of other projects Joe is working on, including new music from Fall Out Boy that he's really excited to be working on.
Okay, those are all the books that we have. 33 books in less than an hour. Good job, everybody. We hope you found something that you enjoyed as well. We hope you all have a great end to your 2022 and have a great evening.